Jeff Andresen is up next. He's going to give us a little bit of an outlook on our weather.
Well, thank you, Eric, and good morning to everyone, and welcome to, at least the early part of our 2023 season here. In terms of, I could cut to a message here, I guess, or a theme, and Christy's talked about some of this, but we're in a very active weather pattern across the Great Lakes region, and that is going to be very apparent over the next several days and probably the next couple of weeks. So that's certainly the theme looking here ahead at where we are. But before we get there, I would like to spend a little bit of time looking in the rearview mirror at where we've been. I think it's important, especially given the very, very mild winter and one that changed moisture situation in many parts of the state. And I'll talk about that here as well. So to begin with, I'd just like to do a quick review of our winter, which is December, January, and February, at least the months that I've got here. Temperature departure from normal on the left, and then departure from normal precipitation expressed in inches on the right. And again, a couple surprises, but the one that's not, if again you've been paying attention here, it has been an unusually mild winter for almost all of the state, maybe save some far northwestern parts of the state, but one of the warmest on record, actually. If we look back to the long-term statistics, it's the sixth warmest winter on average for Michigan back to 1895. So in the top 5%, and a couple more statistics with that. The one that's a little surprising is the precipitation, because we did come into the off season, especially across the eastern parts of the state, eastern portions of the lower, with a deficit and long-term, actually deficits in precipitation in that part of the state. But we have been wetter than normal for the last several weeks. And given the outlook, clearly looking at more precipitation coming. So that's a big reversal or change. And you can see again, percentage of normal precipitation in many areas. And a little, again, it was a dry December, and it was actually a drier than normal January as well. But one would have expected to see some deficits there, and there actually are some minor surpluses. So that's a little bit unexpected. Back to the temperature real quick. This is a long-term trend in Michigan mean temperatures during the winter, and you can see that's one of the most pronounced climate trends climatically we have in Michigan. It's about 4 degrees Fahrenheit per century. That's the long-term trend. But again, as you can see, for this winter, which followed directly in this particular pattern, we were 7 degrees Fahrenheit above normal on average. And again, that puts us at the sixth mildest December through February period on record since 1895. Now, in terms of the changes that have taken place, let's look at the last 30 days here. This is late February through just recently here, and not a surprise in most of lower Michigan, still averaging warmer than normal, just about even up in the upper peninsula, central and western portions there. But the big news here, looking on the right-hand side at our precipitation totals, you can see the last 30 days have been unusually wet. And this is one of the drier times of the year. Typically, we'd be looking at 2.25 inches normal here, but you can see many portions of southern lower Michigan, in some cases more than 4 or even 5 inches of water equivalent. That's both rain, liquid precip, plus melted solid precipitation. So a very, very wet and active weather pattern with a storm track right through the middle of the country. And that, again, that is very likely to continue here over the next several months. A couple more things are extreme minimum temperatures for the winter. Because of the mild winter and directly associated with this, our absolute coldest temperatures of the season were unusually mild. And on the left-hand side here, these are actual air temperature, the minima for the winter. And for a lot of the state, even on the western side of the lower, you can see here, the coldest temperatures were actually only in the single digits. So at least 10 degrees warmer than is typically the case. As you move eastward from there across the lower peninsula, some of them were in the single digits below zero. But again, that variable definitely milder than normal, and it's a reflection of those that mild conditions over the winter. On the right-hand side here, these are 2-inch minimum temperatures for the winter in the soil. This is from EnviroWeather. And what you can also see here is that, with the exception of some crusting on the surface, that 2-inch temperatures in many parts of the state never actually made it below freezing. That's also very unusual, but another reflection of that mild winter. and snow cover changes that quite a bit, but still, it was by almost all measures a very, very unusually warm winter. And one last thing on that, the amount of ice on the Great Lakes, this is a directly result of the mild conditions, only a fraction of normal here. You can see currently just about 5% of the Great Lakes are covered by ice. And that's well below the normal of about 20%. That's in the upper left-hand side here. So we've almost all the season, we've been way below where we typically are. That also follows or consistent with the long-term trend. And as many of you know and appreciate, the less ice we have on the lakes at this point in the time, usually the earlier our seasonal warm-up occurs during the spring. It just takes less energy to, well, it takes a lot of energy to actually to melt ice and vaporize water, and that just typically is, well, given that where we are, that not as much energy is needed, so it goes into heating the air. And so that's one thing to keep in mind here over the next couple of weeks, and it's also consistent with our forecast. And one last thing regarding moisture, I mentioned changes with the precipitation of the last several weeks here. As recently as the end of January, early February, we had significant areas of Michigan, almost half, in unusually dry conditions, and it included some D2 severe drought, which we don't see that often in Michigan, fortunately, but we did see this late last year and into early this year. That's down here in the lower left-hand corner here, and again, really focused on the southeastern portion of the lower peninsula. But given all of the precipitation over the last, especially the last 4 or 5 weeks, now we just have a small little area of that left. And it's not only is the area has decreased significantly, but we no longer we have a little bit of D1, but and that likely will disappear, I'm guessing here, given the outlook for the next couple of weeks. So big changes in terms of moisture. And of course, as we get close to the growing season, you can have too much of a good thing. Yes, we did get recharge, which is great for later on in the season, but we need to start thinking about field work, et cetera. And again, the outlook is looking like that's going to be could be a bit of a challenge. So let's look at current conditions here. This is the National Weather Service all hazards map, indicating all the watches, advisories here for the next 24 to 36 hours. And you can see a couple big areas on here. One I'll bring your attention to across much of the upper Midwest, including portions of, well, almost all of the upper peninsula. There are a number of winter weather advisories coming, and they're looking at a fairly significant storm moving through. And actually, the whole state is, but in the northern part of the state, we're going to see more winter. In the southern part of the state, it's more an early spring version of this. And I'll get to that here in just a moment. Here's our weather map this morning. As of 8 o'clock, high pressure over Ohio, and that's in control right now. Anyway, I was looking at the temperatures. A fairly chilly morning here across much of the state. The temperatures generally in the teens, but in northern Michigan, where there's still a fair amount of snow cover, western and upper peninsula, we had some sub-zero readings actually this morning, which is a reminder. Still, we're on that transition between winter and the warm season, and so it's not gone away yet. But again, the coldest morning we've had collectively over the state in some time. On the lower left-hand side here in our satellite loop, you can see an area. This is the infrared satellite, so we're looking at some clouds here. But the next weather system to approach us, and it's a big system, you can see the moisture associated with that streaming in from the subtropical Pacific across Mexico and into the southern Great Plains. That's what will be coming here late tonight, tomorrow, and on into Saturday with the big event. So looking at the forecast here, here's tonight's weather map, and you can see things with this weather system can come together very quickly. This is basically associated with the same event that again impacted California, one in a series of events that's in fact impacted them, and it will get us as well as it moves through the Midwest. And you can see low pressure out over Nebraska with a warm front to our south. That's going to be lead to our first chance for precipitation beginning again late this evening, but more likely overnight. And as this system moves through over the next 24 to 36 hours, I think there are going to be 2 major episodes of precipitation. One of them is tonight, and then the second will be later on Friday evening and into early Saturday. So 2 major with a little bit less chance in between. But it's important to note, as this warm front approaches, precipitation will develop or begin developing here this evening across western portions of the state and then spread north and east across the state. It may begin because of cold air residual there. It may begin as a mix, but especially in the southern part of the state, it will quickly change over to rain. In the northern part of the state, it'll stay snow. It'll be cold enough there. But again, there could be some mixed precipitation overnight. But the other thing you can see here by tomorrow morning is that this, like many weather systems this winter, this one, the center of it's going to be passing well to the west of at least initially to Michigan, and that's going to allow the warm air that's to the east of the system to move into certainly much of lower Michigan. But the UP, the Upper Peninsula, will stay on the cold side. So we're going to have a huge range or variation in conditions tomorrow as that warm front makes it through. And then finally, by Saturday morning, you can see the system moves on up into northern Lake Huron, across Michigan. And you can see also that the precipitation, both the showers and thunderstorms that we're likely to see across the lower peninsula switch around. The cold air wraps around over to some snow showers, and snow continues in the upper peninsula. So we're looking at a wide range of conditions, especially tomorrow, Friday, ranging from showers and thunderstorms in the south to heavy snow in the northern part of the state. Not atypical for this time of the year. Here's a snowfall forecast looking at, this is for tomorrow night into Saturday, and this shows the chances or probabilities of accumulating at least 6 inches of snowfall. And you can see virtually, well, much of certainly of central and eastern upper Michigan is in that. We will see significant snowfall there, and it decreases rapidly as you go south. There's a chance in the northern lower we could get some snow at the outset of this, and then probably again as the cold air filters in late on Friday and into early Saturday. No snow or very little snow expected to the south of that over central and lower Michigan. There is the chance, I should mention here, that with this particular system, it's very dynamic. There's a lot happening in the atmosphere. We might see a fairly significant severe weather outbreak with this storm, but it looks like the highest risk for this will be off to our west and southwest out over Iowa, Illinois. But the reason I bring that up, while those areas will be under the gun probably tomorrow for severe weather, some of the storms that develop there could make it into southwestern lower Michigan tomorrow night. So again, I think we may see some lightning and thunder, certainly are expected in southern and central lower Michigan, but a couple of those storms the stronger ones could sneak into the southwest, but most of the severe weather with this, if there is, should remain to the south of Michigan, but something to keep an eye on. And then finally, not to be outdone, I mentioned we're in a very active weather pattern. There's a round 2, and that will be coming by probably by Tuesday of next week, continuing into Wednesday. This is a weather map depicting forecast conditions as of 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. You can see similar, maybe even a further westward path is expected with this system, but it puts Michigan, this one we could see severe weather with the way things are looking at right now. It is, again, that time of the year where we can see changes, but another warm day. We will, and by the way, temperatures, I did mention this, I should have, tomorrow in the warm sector of this system, we will be increasing from the 30s and 40s today for high temperatures into the low 60s, maybe even some mid 60s across southern Michigan. It'll be the warmest day we've had in a long time. The north will stay cold to the north of that, only in the 30s, and then temperatures will crash over the weekend as cold air wraps around. But we could see a repeat of that type of pattern once again by the middle of next week, with springtime conditions expected again Tuesday and Wednesday. But the other issue is more heavy rain, more heavy precipitation is expected, and that's what I've got here. These are forecast, or at least potential precipitation potential. And this is one of the wettest maps we've seen in a long time. You can see that 1 to 2 inches of precipitation expected in the upcoming week. Again, most of it will be tomorrow and tomorrow evening, but also then this includes the event for the middle of next week and Tuesday and Wednesday. So some of the heaviest precipitation we've seen in parts of the state for actually months, for a long, long time. So there will be challenges, obviously, with soil moisture. There will be standing water almost without a doubt. And so we'll have to wait a little bit of time for things to drain off. But it is a very, very active weather pattern. Well, going beyond that, what about into the medium and long lead? And the answer is, at least for the medium range and probably longer, it's still looking like an active weather pattern with a southwesterly jet stream flow over the central part of the U.S., which pushed Michigan right again in that dividing line with a storm track through the region, and more frequent than normal chances for precipitation. You can see on the right-hand side here, mean temperatures are forecast to range from a little cooler than normal in the far northwestern part of the state in the Upper Peninsula to a little bit warmer than normal in the southeast. So again, Michigan's right on the dividing line, but more importantly, I think, looking at that precip, many chances for precipitation, and still for much of the central and eastern U.S. as a result of that, above normal precipitation totals are expected. And that's the same theme for our new long leads, or our updated long leads. April, on the top panel here, mean temperatures expected to increase to above normal levels, which isn't surprising. And that's the same case for the April through June and even beyond that. They're all very, very similar in calling for generally warmer and wetter than normal conditions. And that's been a consistent theme in these outlooks for some time, and it still is with the most recent ones. Down in the lower left-hand corner here, another graphic just to remind people that the La Nina event that we've had for the last 3 years, a long one, only the second time that's happened since the middle of last century, is officially over. We're at neutral now out in the equatorial Pacific, or officially neutral conditions. So the La Nina has come to an end, but there's more news. And the news is that most of the outlooks here call for a warming of the eastern equatorial Pacific, and probably the beginning of an El Nino event, which is, again, the other phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, that we hear about. And so we're likely looking at the beginning of an El Nino event by later this year, the summer, the fall, and that will probably play a role, at least in our forecast, for the latter part of this year. But up until then, and reviewing here, again, expect a very unsettled, active weather pattern across Michigan, with lots of changes and almost extremes in temperature as well, with more winter in the northern part of the state, and then a taste of spring in the south as we start to get some thunderstorms. But I think the big news is, above all, is that we are very, very likely going to see well above normal precipitation totals. That's the big theme here, and that continues into the medium range and even into the long lead as well. And with that, I'll wrap up, and I apologize for all the material, but we had some review to catch up here. We won't need to do that here from here on out, but it is some of these things I think are worth noting, especially with regard to the mild conditions in the winter. Well, next week, our speaker, we're going to shift gears just a little bit. We'll have Dr. Kurt Steinke with us to talk about soil fertility, and it's that time of the year to think about that for corn, soy, and wheat. And so with that, I'll turn it back over here to Eric.